Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyersportsbetting.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, it's March the 3rd, 2017. Let's talk about David Haye against Tony Bellew. Now, in a simple world, right, where we just have to say, if I had one bet to make, what would it be? If I had a gun to my head, I would pick David Haye to win this fight. He's the big favorite. Understand, this is a heavyweight against a cruiserweight, and as they say in boxing, a good big man beats a good little man. Right? Let's also remember, too, that Tony Bellew got destroyed by Adonis Stevenson. And Stevenson is a guy who uses spacing and speed, right? Stevenson likes to jump around outside. Then he likes to come in with straight left hands from distance, right? And that kind of ambush type of fighting resulted in Tony getting knocked out in the middle rounds, right? Tony had a problem with a guy who could stay outside, pick his spots, come in, flash, power, flash, hand speed. So, I believe David Haye has the edge, as does the betting market. But you and I know that life is more complicated than that, don't we? Right? I don't want to be right on this fight. I want to make a profit on the fight. They're two different things. I want better odds than what's being offered right now. David Haye to win is a minus 600. Bet 600 to win 100. I don't want those odds, especially when it's an unhedged position. Because let's face it, the world has uncertainty. Even fights like this, where you think you know who's going to win, the other guy is only one punch away from proving that wrong. I'm one of those bettors who believes that if two teams play each other 10 times, maybe the better team wins 7 of the 10, but that means that the team that's not the better team is winning 3 of the 10. So we want better odds and we want a hedge. Especially so in this fight, where you have two men who know David Haye better than most. Right? The first is Adam Booth, who used to train David Haye. The second is Derek Chisora. And both of them have expressed concerns about David Haye's stamina. If you look at the video I made a few months ago on this fight that's still online, I expressed concerns about David Haye's stamina. I believe David Haye was on very thin ice, when he knocked out Derek Chisora. I thought he was very tired in that fight. Right now, there is a scenario here where Tony Bellew survives the early rounds and then finds himself in with an older, slightly older, but older, heavyweight who hasn't gone several rounds of late, who might be tiring. And given Tony's skill set, Tony has the ability to get inside on you, right? Especially if you're tired. So an ambush fighter might be too sudden for Tony early. But later in the fight, when that ambush fighter slows down, Tony might be able to get inside. Tony might be able to do damage. There's some other storm clouds out there. David Haye, relatively recently, right? It led to the cancellation of one of his fights against Tyson Fury, right? Neither fight happened. David Haye had major shoulder surgery. Right? Major. Now that's a big part of Haye's game because Haye's a power puncher, right? Haye leans into punches. Haye uses his shoulders. More recently, this week, we're hearing that Haye had concerns over his Achilles. That's also major. Because students of the game know that a lot of punching power comes from your legs. If you have an Achilles that's not right, that's partially torn or that's sore, and if you're not able to use your legs for leverage, that might take away some of your power. So with all of this in mind, let's think about structuring a bet that gives us more chances to win. In other words, gives us a hedge, gives us a piece of Tony Bellew, and that would pay us better than the minus 600 on Haye to win. The one that leaps out to me is the under 7.5 rounds at minus 300. Right? If you believe David Haye is going to be too big, too fast, too explosive for Tony, then I believe you would necessarily believe that David Haye is going to run through Tony before the halfway point of the 8th round. In fact, you have to go back to 2010 to find a David Haye fight that he won by knockout where he didn't knock out the guy in the first 7.5 rounds. Right? That fight, by the way, is David Haye against John Ruiz. Right? Haye KOs him in the 9th round. In other words, when Haye gets a KO, it's usually before the halfway point of the 8th round. Now you're getting that at a minus 300. Understand too, what the under 7.5 means is that if either guy gets to stoppage before the halfway point of the 8th round, you win. Right? Either guy. The hedge for this is Tony Bellew. We're going to be dangerous here, folks. This is not the timid part of the internet. Tony Bellew by stoppage at a plus 650. In other words, if David Haye comes out, as I think he will, right? This is how I see the fight playing out, and is just a bigger presence in the ring. The guys are roughly the same height, but Tony's been fighting cruisers. David's been fighting heavies, right, for years, right? By the way, that Tony Adonis Stevenson fight was at 175. Think about it, right? Tony was down at light heavy for a while. Well, David, if he's too big, too powerful for Tony, if this is a statement fight, right? Tony's defense is not world class, right? If David has studied Tony, and make no mistake, I understand David Haye was training on a boat in Miami, and there, shots of David Haye supposedly in camp where he's playing basketball and stuff like that. But it's clear to me, looking at David Haye fights, that Haye is always one of the more prepared fighters in the sport. You see it from the first round. David Haye doesn't show up barely knowing who his opponent is. David Haye has studied his opponent. Right? Haye's a guy who comes in with a plan. One of the reasons why he's been knocking guys out in the first round of recent fights is because David Haye studies who he wants to fight. He figures out the guys who are tailor-made for him. And then he comes in with his ambush style. And the other guy just doesn't have the hand speed, doesn't have the mobility, doesn't have the defense to compete with him. So David Haye has taken this fight. We'll ignore this phone in the background, right? David Haye has taken this fight. If Haye is right, and Tony Bellew is tailor-made for him, David Haye should end the show in the first 7.5 rounds. That part of the head should hold. But if David Haye is wrong, if Tony Bellew somehow is able to survive the early part of the fight, if he's able to neutralize David Haye's speed by smothering it, and that's a distinct possibility. I want people to go back to the rematch of Tony Bellew against Nathan Cleverly. If Bellew's able to get too close to Haye, as I like to say here online, how do you beat an ambush fighter? You follow him after the ambush. Right? If Tony Bellew can survive David Haye's early onslaught, and if he's still standing at the end of the midway point of the 8th round, Bellew has a shot at a stoppage, according to BoxRec.com. And you need to confirm this as you place your bet. This is a 12-round fight. 12 rounds. David Haye hasn't gone 12 rounds since fighting Vladimir Klitschko. And Vladimir Klitschko, for all of his talents, does not fight inside as well as Tony Bellew. Right? So, with actual odds, I'm looking on a betting website. Just contrast these odds to what your betting outfit is offering you, your casino is offering you. The hedge I like is the under. 7.5 rounds at -300. Hedged with Tony Bellew by KO at a +650. But I want you to understand the risk involved. If David Haye gets a KO after the midway point of the 8th round, or if this fight goes the distance, you lose it all. It's high risk. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Tell us the actual odds, the actual plays that you feel are attractive to gamblers, and tell us why in the comment section to this video. I personally don't see this fight going the distance. In my opinion, either Haye comes out and steamrolls Tony Bellew, or Tony somehow is able to survive a lot of the steamrolling and then finds that Haye is out of bullets and stops him. I'll be the most shocked man watching the telecast if it actually goes 12 rounds. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. For more cautious bettors, you could take the under 7.5 at -300 and hedge it with Tony simply to win the fight. Right? I believe that that hedge might be possible. Tony simply to win is a +375. In other words, you would be dealing with the spread between a -300 and a +375, right? That would allow you to win if Tony wins by decision, right? I'm going to be more risk-taking than that. I like the under 7.5 at -300 hedged with Tony Bellew by KO at +650. We'll see how this one goes. Thanks for stopping by.